Know the Faith, Defend the Faith. My name is William Hemsworth. It's great to be back with you. My guest, he's been on before, author of Fragments, a Theological Story, Peter Cavallaro. Peter, how are you doing today?
William, it's great to be with you. I always love talking to you. Up in the Northeast, we've got a lot of COVID right now, but we're all hanging in here, and God willing, we'll get through it quickly.
Well, man, let's work together on it. I mean, it's on the rise here in the Southwest and Arizona as well. It's been a little bit since we've talked with you, and we have a lot of new listeners, thanks be to God. So maybe we could, before we get into our subject today, which is arguments for the existence of God, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you started getting involved in apologetics, and maybe where we can find your book.
Sure. So I'm an attorney by trade, and I still am practicing as an attorney. But earlier this year, I wrote the book Fragments that William mentioned, which at the end of the day, I mean, there's some fictional components to it, but it seeks to put forward a couple new arguments for the existence of God and kind of get the juices flowing and just give some thought-provoking ideas. And it's geared toward a faithful as well as a secular audience to try to engage folks in this timeless debate. And I kind of picked up the interest in apologetics and in philosophy generally back in college. And I learned a lot of classical and medieval philosophy at that point. And so you'll see certainly some of those ideas coming to life in the book, as well as, trying to update things for, a newer audience, maybe a younger audience. So I try a couple different things to keep it novel, but that's sort of the gist of the book.
Okay. So what kind of feedback have you received on the book so far?
I've gotten great feedback, and most importantly, I've just been involved in a lot of great conversations with folks, which is exactly what I was hoping for. I wanted to start dialogues. The book itself is written in a dialectic form, sort of a dialogue between two characters. And so I really do, I'm a firm believer in the idea of dialogue and conversation, kickstarting truth and, I guess the realization of truth. And so I've had a lot of great conversations with people that don't necessarily agree with all my arguments, but found them interesting and wanted to engage and wanted to push them a little bit. And I've learned a lot myself. And from what I hear, people, clergy and lay people alike have gotten a lot out of it as well.
Oh, great. That's good to hear. And I know since last time you were on Gary Michuta's program, Hands on Apologetics. Yeah. It's always fun being on with him, isn't it?
He's awesome. Yeah, definitely.
He's called the sensei for a reason. I mean, he knows, I think, so much more than I'll ever know. But it's just a great guy.
Yeah, and he's a great guy. Yeah.
He is humble, down to earth, and always willing to help, which is just awesome.
Absolutely.
So our topic today is arguments for the existence of God. And like you said, it's a timeless debate. And maybe we could start off with some of the stuff that you mentioned in your book about it. So what's a couple of those arguments out there about the existence of God, or maybe about, use of reason to come to terms with that, even that are out there that maybe you found helpful?
Well, so, and you say it aptly. I mean, reason is one of two central pillars of our Catholic Church, faith and reason. And I think it's a hallmark of our church that we see them as mutually reinforcing, non-competing avenues to God. And it's a worthy endeavor for people, even people of faith, who already believe in God, to sort of sharpen their understanding from an intellectual point of view, and to, delve into some of these arguments for the existence of God, both to enhance their own encounter with God, but also to, I think, make them prepared to interact with skeptics, atheists on their own terms. These are people for whom appeals to faith and revelation aren't initially going to be as persuasive. So, I think we should fearlessly and joyfully interact with, some of the more intellectual sides of the exploration of theology. My book focuses on a genre of proof for the existence of God that I call experiential proofs. So with an experiential proof for the existence of God, the focus is on certain facets of our internal psychology or our internal thought process, and positing that certain reactions we have, thoughts we have, experiences that we, phenomena that we experience wouldn't be that way, but for our recognition that we're living in a world that's been ordered by God. And so, just to give an example, one of the things my book explores is that we have an inborn recognition of beauty, natural beauty, and it argues that we wouldn't have this reaction, we wouldn't identify beauty in the world if not for recognizing that the world, has an intelligently imposed order to it. Similarly, and this is an argument that you see very famously in Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. There's an experiential argument for morality, which would say that we all, as humans, feel the call of a moral code that we detect is not our own, and when trying to discern the origins of this phenomenon within us, we come to the conclusion that we are detecting sort of a externally imposed moral architecture that points to God. It's not something that we made up. It's not something that belongs to us. At the same time, it's something that does have an objective characteristic to it. So that's the, I think, category of argument that my book picks up, simply because I wanted to, that was sort of an avenue I wanted to explore further. And it's an avenue that I think is not always touched upon in sort of current writing.
So why do you think that is, especially when it comes to the argument of beauty? Why do you think that's something that's not delved into more, like you said, in writing today?
Well, I think that the argument from beauty, actually, there's different. So both the argument from beauty, the argument from morality, they can be put into different baskets in terms of arguments for the existence of God. The argument from beauty that I focused on is experiential to the point of to the extent that the focus is on internally what's going on in the person when they're interacting with the natural world. But I think the more common formulation of that theme is a sort of teleological argument. Now, the teleological argument for the existence of God should actually be more appropriately viewed as a category of arguments. It's a species of argument. There's dozens of teleological arguments. The common denominator behind teleological arguments goes back to the word telos, which is Greek for purpose or goal. And the idea is an argument is a teleological argument if it looks at the world around us, looks at features of the natural world, and concludes based on those features that they evince some kind of purpose or intelligent design in the world. So when you hear intelligent design, think of teleological argument. So that's probably along with a type of argument, the two arguments that have the most currency today. And I think that they really are some of the most thought-provoking and varied arguments that there are on this topic. The teleological argument, so the focus is on the natural world and is basically concluding that there is a divine order, there is an intelligent design to what we're seeing. And so there's a lot of overlap there between that and sort of my more experiential focus on aspects of natural beauty.
So the teleological, would that, and I'm saying this for listeners that may be new to this, because this is actually the first time we've covered this on my show, would that be sort of like the Watchmaker Theory?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's definitely different formulations of it, but in the 19th century, there was this Watchmaker Analogy that I think is a pretty good one, which would say, so remember, teleological, telos, focuses on looking at the natural world and discerning some kind of overlying purpose behind it, some kind of intelligent design. The Watchmaker Analogy would say, if you were walking through the woods and you found this beautiful Swiss watch on the ground, you would look at it, you would see how elegant it was designed, how intentional, purposeful, ornate it was. And there would be no doubt in your mind that it was an intelligently designed thing. It wasn't just some naturally occurring rock. It was something that was created intentionally by a divine engineer. The Watchmaker Analogy would have us look and think that way of the world at large. You walk on the beach, you climb a mountain, you walk in the woods. The natural beauty that you encounter is no less intricate, no less ornate. We should have the same conclusion about what we're seeing in the natural world than we do when we see a watch on the ground. And so that is sort of the spirit of the teleological argument. Theologians that are in this space typically have a command of physics, biology, astronomy, and they're usually interacting with the most cutting edge scientific discoveries that are out there, which are constantly changing, because they're constantly trying to show instances in which there's room for God in this majestic creation. So you typically in teleological arguments you'll have arguments that appeal to the elegance of certain things in the universe, whether it's looking at universal constants or certain chemical reactions. You have a lot of discussion of probabilistic arguments. What is the probability that such and such would exist in the universe absent an intelligent designer? So again, it's a lot of interaction with the science, with the astronomy and physics, and there's a lot of sophisticated new arguments being propounded in recent decades in this space.
Can you give us examples of a couple of those?
Well, so this is I'm not as proficient with some of the more like there's some arguments that have come out recently. There's a book by Robert Spitzer, who's a Jesuit priest, and it's actually called New Arguments for the Existence of God, where they're actually interacting with string theory,
Oh, wow.
quantum mechanics. I mean, it really is a very sophisticated business, and you really that's why I find teleological arguments among the most persuasive. I'm also least proficient in them because sort of to practice at that level, you need to have a working knowledge of the science and sometimes of mathematics. I mean, there's a lot of sophistication, but there are definitely a lot of books out there that, you name it, whatever the most cutting edge scientific forefront is, there's theologians that are addressing it and that are fighting that battle. But let me talk actually about the cosmological argument, because I think that's one that is a little bit closer to home for me, because it's a little bit more logic oriented. And along with the teleological argument, cosmological argument is probably where a lot of the action is today. And just like with teleological argument, this is an instance where it's more a category of argument. It's a species of argument. There's dozens of cosmological arguments going back to the ancient Greeks. And the common denominator here is an argument is a cosmological argument if it looks at the cosmos around us, if it looks at the order of our reality, and it draws conclusions as to the existence of God based on certain features, certain necessary features of that fabric of our reality. So the most famous example is from Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. And 4 out of the 5 arguments for the existence of God that St. Thomas offers us are basically cosmological arguments. So his first one is an argument from motion. He observes that everything in the universe is in motion. And in order for something to be in motion, it has to be put in motion by something else. But in order to avoid an infinite regress of things that are constantly getting put into motion without something starting it off, there has to be an unmoved first mover, which I find a very neat way of phrasing it. His second argument is an argument from causation, very similar to the first. He observes that everything in the universe is the product of some cause. It's caused by something. And in order to avoid an infinite domino of causes on top of causes on top of causes, there has to be an uncaused first cause that first flipped over that domino, that row of dominoes. His third argument is an argument from contingency. He says that everything we see around us, including ourselves, is contingent, which is to say, we can imagine that it exists. We could also imagine an instance where it doesn't exist. We can imagine it being in existence. We can imagine it going out of existence. But if that was true and everything was contingent, there would come a point where nothing existed. In order for things to sort of work as we observe them to be, there has to be something whose existence is not contingent on anything else. And his final argument in the cosmological vein is an argument from degree. He observes that everything in the universe appears to be ordered toward degrees of perfection. And this could apply to anything. So if you think of 5 people sitting in a row drawing a circle, you could probably rank the circles that they draw in order of what is a more perfect circle, what's the most perfect circle among these five. But if everything is pointing towards some ultimate perfection, it implies that the universe itself is oriented toward an absolute perfection, and this is what he calls God. And so the cosmological arguments, there's some classical physics involved, but they're also very much logically oriented. And likewise, today there are a lot of arguments coming out in that vein.
You're talking about the first mover. I was watching a documentary. My 7-year-old son loves documentaries, especially about space. Yeah. And one of the scientists on there said that the universe is expanding, but we haven't yet figured out why. And it kind of seems like, well, Thomas Aquinas already was on that way back when. So,
yeah. This is before Isaac Newton, with the laws of gravity, the laws of motion, whatever. Yeah, he was pretty. It goes to show how far natural reason can take us, even if we don't know the specifics, we can apply our natural reason. And that's what he devoted his life to.
So why do you think it's important for us as lay people to maybe have a working knowledge, if you will, about some of these arguments that are out there?
I look at them as all tools in a toolkit. And when you have something you want to fix, you bring your toolkit, and you don't know what tools you're going to need, but you always want to have the right tool for the job. And at the end of the day, I think all of us, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it, whether we're intentional about it or unintentional about it, we're all seeking God. We're intellectual beings. We all have a hunger to know and to understand the world around us. And we all have really a desire to have, perfect, complete knowledge, which obviously we can't get in this life, and would only be satisfied if there's such a thing as God sort of at the end of the line that we can sort of unite ourselves to. And so, even people for whom faith is not part of their lives, and maybe they're actively, not spiritual folks, there is a hunger there. And so the end goal is to meet the living God, is to get to know God and walk with God in our lives. But I think to get there, certain things, appeal to different people, and not everybody finds the same things convincing. I mean, at the broadest level, this is why I started with that dichotomy of faith and reason. It's not necessarily a given in every religious tradition that these two avenues would be viewed as non-competing and non-threatening to one another. In fact, it wasn't always the case in our own church. It really wasn't until the 19th century that kind of became crystallized. And again, it's indebted to the work that Thomas Aquinas did back in the 13th century. But there are people for whom you could have the greatest argument for the existence of God. You could write it all down, and it's just doesn't do it for them. They need to feel. They need to be touched by that road to Damascus experience. They need to have that conversion experience. And that's what's going to get them over the line. But then there's a whole nother set of people for whom, they don't, at least initially, don't talk to me about faith, just the facts, man. I need you to appeal to my head, not my heart, and if I don't believe to begin with, engaging me on, with using terms from Revelation and so forth is not going to do it. And so we need to sharpen ourselves for these arguments, for the existence of God from an intellectual point of view. And we also need to, even among those arguments, there's different tools for the job. Like I said, science-oriented, logic-oriented, experiential, which might appeal to a more common man, everyday kind of thing. Everybody experiences beauty. Everybody has a creative drive. Everybody expresses love toward others. Everybody has this moral, feeling to obey some moral code. So, different people, click to different things. And so that's why I think we should, as apologists, always try to be jacks of all trade.
Well, it's funny, you talk about the experiential with the moral code and the beauty, and that's the argument that St. Paul uses with the Romans. I mean, right off the bat, before he gets into his letter in Romans 1. Yeah. So what are do you have any resources that you recommend that our listeners could check out to learn more about these arguments, to, like you said, put a new tool in the toolbox?
I like to read the primary texts, but I also think that it's easier perhaps to read synopsis, to read, I guess, distillations of especially older texts, because I had the benefit. I took courses in Aristotle and classical philosophy and such, and it took a while to kind of get my head around it because there's its own vocabulary that comes with it. So I guess what I would say is for someone who wants to kind of build up some working knowledge of some of these proofs, I would first start by thinking about what is the type of proof that you think speaks most to you. Even when I wrote my book, I focused on proofs that I found most relevant to my frontline experience as a person just operating in the world. To me, I like natural beauty. I like familial connection and love to the people that are close to me. I'm a creative person. I had all these thoughts about things that I experienced, and I saw echoes of God in them. And so that's what inspired me to want to focus some of my writing on exploring how to get to God from those experiences. But if people are interested in astronomy or space or string theory or if they are interested in that's the other thing. A lot of these because a lot of these arguments have a veritable historical lineage, going back, and they're developed over time. There's a lot of history involved too. So if you're interested in history, if you're interested in the medieval period or classical period or the Renaissance period, maybe one thing to do would be to look up some of the leading thinkers of that time, and because inevitably when we read, I'll take Thomas Aquinas because we've been discussing him. Mm-hmm. He is a product of his time in a good way. He's developing everything that's come before him, from Arab philosophers and from early Greek philosophers and from early medieval philosophers. And so if you like history and you want to inhabit that space, pick a thinker maybe that was impactful during that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next for you? I know you've been doing some interviews here and there. You came out with the great book Fragments. What's next for you? What's on the horizon?
I mean, I think I've had some writings that I want to put together and develop a little more, this time a little bit more Christ focused. I think that step one, I always look at getting to God from an intellectual point of view as a 3-step process. First, you got to go from nothing to God, lowercase g, which is just some intelligence out there, something uncreated versus something created, a divine mind of some kind. Then you got to go from God, lowercase g, to God, uppercase G, the personal God, the God of the Old and the New Testament, the God that we believe in as Christians, that created the world and that interacts with the world and isn't just, some uncategorizable force out there. And then you got to go from God, uppercase G, to Christ, the specific, I guess, which, as you start to get up, higher on the pyramid, you're getting more specific with respect to Christian thought. And I think you also have to sort of change focuses and how you get there. And so I'm starting to do some writing on sort of getting now to Christ, having gone from sort of nothing to God. I want to kind of crystallize it a little bit more and say, well, why does it make sense to believe in, that God incarnated himself at a specific point in time, and has a Trinitarian component that exists, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, these very specific articles of Christian faith.
Well, that sounds fascinating. So I know you have a lot on your plate, so I'm sorry to ask the question. When do you think you may have something like that done?
Yeah, a lot on my plate. I think that a lot of times this starts as sort of scattered writings and, essay length stuff. And right. Then, I might tie it together a little bit more concretely after, some of that stuff kind of gets some legs. So we'll see.
All right. Well, very good. Well, we look forward to it whenever it comes out. But in the meantime, everyone check out Fragments, A Theological Story. And Peter, where could they check out the book?
Amazon. You can get it on Amazon.
All right, check it out on Amazon. It's on paperback and Kindle. So check it out. It's a great read. Did a great job. Very.
Thank you.
You said you're a creative person. It was very creative, having the dialoguing aspect to it.
Yeah.
So very unique.
Very kind. Thank you.
So Peter, I thank you for coming on the program today, giving us a breakdown of some of those arguments. Any last words of wisdom before I let you go to enjoy the rest of your Saturday?
I would just be joyful about it. I mean, if this is something that is a lifetime endeavor, it's not something that, we should look to gain absolute certainty or absolute satisfaction from just in one reading session, and also have intellectual humility, challenge yourself, don't fall back on your beliefs without putting them through the gauntlet. And just look at this as an opportunity to sharpen your faith. At the end of the day, you'll come out stronger for it.
Well, great. Very good. Very good. Well, again, thank you for coming on. And guys, lots of arguments for the existence of God out there. So check them out. We need to be familiar with them. Well, Peter, thanks again, and God bless.
Thanks, William. God bless.